It all started on a bright Monday morning. I was sipping my coffee, enjoying the view of my backyard, when I heard a knock at the door. It was Karen, the notorious HOA president, who everyone in the neighborhood whispered about. And she wasn't just visiting to borrow sugar. No, this time she had brought the dreaded notice, a fine for my solar panels. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. My solar panels, installed legally and safely, were suddenly a crime. According to Karen, their aesthetic violated HOA rules. The sheer absurdity made my blood boil. But instead of arguing right there, I calmly took the notice, smiled politely, and said, "Thank you for letting me know," while internally, I was already plotting a response. As the day went on, I couldn't stop thinking about Karen's obsession with controlling every detail of our neighborhood. The maniacal way she patrolled lawns, policed garden gnomes, and now fined people for embracing renewable energy was surreal. But the more I thought about it, the clearer a bold plan became. I started researching her house. Turns out she had a massive roof with perfect sunlight. Exposure basically a solar panel paradise. That's when the idea hit me. If she wanted to control my solar panels, why not give her a taste of the same energy revolution? I sketched out the plan. First, I'd need a way to legally and safely install panels on her roof. Then, I'd have to add a touch of irony that she couldn't ignore. I sketched out the plan. First, I'd need a way to legally and safely install panels on her roof. Then, I'd have to add a touch of irony that she couldn't ignore. The more I imagined her reaction, flabbergasted, speechless, maybe even scrambling to call the HOA, more I grinned. But this wasn't going to be some reckless stunt. It had to be smart, clean, and most importantly, unforgettable. I envisioned installing panels that would not only generate energy, but also serve as a quiet, unspoken message about personal freedom, sustainability, and, yes, a little payback. Little did I know, this plan would unleash a chain of events, more chaotic and hilarious than I could have imagined. Karen was about to learn that messing with someone's solar panels could backfire spectacularly. After my initial idea hit me, the next step was planning. I couldn't just slap solar panels on Karen's roof. This needed strategy, timing, and precision. First, I walked around her house multiple times, taking mental notes, the slope of the roof, the best spots for maximum sunlight, and the points where it would be most visible from the street. Every detail mattered, because this had to be both effective and completely safe. Next, I started researching solar panel kits. I didn't want anything cheap or flimsy that could cause real damage or legal trouble. I wanted panels that were efficient, professional-looking, and durable. I also realized that I needed some way to make this ironic. We drafted a step-by-step plan. Acquire materials, prepare the panels, schedule the installation for a time when Karen would be out, and execute it like clockwork. Meanwhile, the excitement built as I imagined her reaction. Karen had always been dramatic. She'd stomp across the street, clutching her HOA clipboard, eyes wide with fury, demanding to know why the world was conspiring against her. The mental image of her pacing back and forth, while the sun gleamed off her brand-new solar panels, made me chuckle uncontrollably. But I reminded myself this wasn't about revenge in a childish sense. This was about sending a message. I had the right to embrace renewable energy on my property, and no HOA rule could intimidate me. In fact, if anything, this would highlight the absurdity of her obsession with control. Every step I took, every panel I installed, was a statement of freedom, humor, and environmental consciousness. Finally, after days of preparation, measuring, and testing, the moment was approaching. We double-checked the equipment, reviewed the safety protocols, and made sure the panels were ready for installation. What started as an idea fueled by frustration had turned into a full-blown mission. Little did I know, Executing this plan would test our patience, skills, and creativity to the max end. It would also push Karen into a frenzy she would never forget. The stage was set, and soon the quiet suburban street would witness one of the most ironic neighborhood showdowns of all time. The day had finally arrived. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and Karen was blissfully unaware of the chaos about to descend upon her perfectly manicured lawn. Jake and I loaded the truck with solar panels, tools, and safety gear, and double-checked our plan one last time. Timing was crucial. Karen had a habit of taking mid-morning walks around the neighborhood, so we waited until she left the house before making our move. We approached her property cautiously, like conspirators in a heist movie. Every step was measured. Every glance over our shoulders ensured she hadn't returned early. The moment we set the panels down on her driveway, I felt a mix of exhilaration and nerves. This wasn't just about installing solar panels. It was about pulling off a stunt that would be both clever and unarguably ironic. Jake climbed the ladder first, securing the panels with precision. I handed him tools, kept an eye on the surroundings, and made sure everything was perfectly aligned. Each panel was a little victory, a small rebellion against Karen's obsession with control. As we worked, I imagined the moment she'd discover what we'd done. Would she scream, stomp her feet, call the HOA? The thought made me grin uncontrollably. We installed the panels meticulously, making sure they were positioned for maximum sunlight exposure. We double-checked every connection and bolt, ensuring there would be no damage to her roof. The irony of giving someone who fined me for solar panels a full rooftop of them was delicious. It was like poetic justice, but with electricity. By the time the last panel was secured, the sun reflected off them perfectly. I stepped back, feeling a mixture of triumph and nervous anticipation. Jake and I high-fived, silently celebrating our success. But the real test was yet to come. Karen's reaction, as if on cue, we heard her car in the driveway. My heart raced. I quickly hid some of the tools and took a step back to watch. Karen stepped out, sunglasses on, clutching her clipboard, and stopped dead in her tracks. Her jaw dropped, her eyes widened, and she stumbled forward slightly, as if the sun itself had betrayed her. She was staring at her own roof now, glinting with panels she had never authorized. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, in true Karen fashion, she started yelling, waving her clipboard like a sword, demanding to know how this had happened. I could barely contain my laughter as she ran from one side of the yard to the other, trying to find some rule, some loophole, some justification to fight the panels we had installed. The quiet neighborhood was now buzzing with excitement, kids peeking from windows, neighbors stepping out to watch, all witnessing Karen's meltdown in real time. It was perfect. The installation wasn't just a prank. It was a statement, a spectacle, and a lesson wrapped in irony. Karen's reaction was everything I had imagined on, then some. She was pacing back and forth, like a storm cloud had descended on her perfectly controlled world. Her clipboard waved violently in the air as she shouted at the top of her lungs, demanding answers from anyone who would listen. Some neighbors peeked out their windows, clearly entertained, while others tried to avoid the drama entirely. I stayed back, pretending to sip coffee on my porch, acting innocent, but inside I was grinning from ear to ear. "Who did this?" she shrieked, pointing at her newly installed solar panels, as if they were invading aliens. "This is illegal. This is outrageous. I'm calling the HOA," and that's exactly what she did. Within minutes, her phone was glued to her ear, issuing a flurry of complaints, formal threats, and frantic explanations. It was hilarious watching her fumble with the situation. Meanwhile, neighbors started quietly whispering, some even recording videos on their phones. It was like a suburban reality show, and Karen was the unwilling star. The HOA arrived soon after, in all their official glory. They walked up, clipboards in hand, looking around as Karen pointed at the panels and explained the violation. I greeted them calmly, holding back laughter, and simply said, "The panels are fully legal and safe, and they're on Karen's roof now. You might want to take a look." The HOA inspectors were speechless for a moment, exchanging glances. They reviewed the panels, checking permits and regulations. Everything was in order. There was nothing illegal about what we had done. Karen, on the other hand, was red-faced, sputtering, trying desperately to argue, but there were no rules to enforce against a homeowner who legally installed solar panels on their own roof, even if it happened to be hers. By the time the HOA left, Karen was flustered, frustrated, and utterly defeated. She stormed back inside her house, muttering about fines, rules, and neighbors gone rogue. Meanwhile, word spread quickly through the neighborhood. People couldn't stop talking about the bold move, and I started receiving messages from neighbors congratulating me on my creativity and courage. Some even joked that it was the most satisfying HOA revenge ever. In that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about standing up to absurd rules, protecting personal freedom, and finding humor in situations where most people would feel powerless. And the icing on the cake. Karen had become a living lesson in irony, right on top of her own roof. The days following the solar panel installation were a mix of hilarity, disbelief, and subtle neighborhood fame. Karen refused to speak to me directly, instead sending passive, aggressive notes under my door, each more ridiculous than the last. One note demanded that I remove the panels immediately, though legally there was no way she could enforce that. Another claimed that justice would be served if the HOA got involved again. I couldn't help but laugh every time I read one. Her dramatic flair was truly unmatched. Meanwhile, word about the stunt spread throughout the neighborhood like wildfire. Other neighbors started whispering about the solar panel, GA, some applauding my creativity, others shaking their heads in amused disbelief. A few even jokingly asked if I could help them send a message to their own HOA troubles. It was surreal. What started as a personal response had turned into a legendary tale in our little suburban community. Karen, for her part, became the neighborhood cautionary tale. People would nod sympathetically when she ranted about minor rules, but privately, most were secretly cheering for my audacious response. Her obsession with control had ironically showcased my freedom and ingenuity, and it was impossible for her to argue otherwise without looking unreasonable, which she already did. Life went back to normal on my street, though with a new layer of subtle excitement. I checked the energy output from the panels regularly, marveling at the irony that the very solar panels Karen hated were now generating clean electricity for her house. Every time the sun hit them, I couldn't help but smile. The panels weren't just energy sources, they were symbols of clever resistance. A reminder that rules should never overshadow common sense, and sometimes humor is the best weapon. Looking back, I realized the stunt taught everyone a lesson, not just Karen. It showed that standing up for what's right can be fun, creative, and completely satisfying. And while Karen may never admit it, the irony of the situation was probably sinking in. She had fined me for embracing renewable energy, and now she was unknowingly benefiting from it herself. The universe has a funny way of balancing things, and in this case, it did so spectacularly. As for me, I got something even better than satisfaction, a story that would be retold for years. Laughter from my neighbors, and the sweet realization that ingenuity and courage could turn even the most ridiculous conflict into a legendary victory. And Karen, she's still fuming somewhere under the sun-reflecting panels, the unwilling protagonist of her very own irony story. And so, my solar panel saga ends not with a fight, but with a grin, a little electricity, and a very clear message. Never underestimate the power of creativity, patience, and a well-timed dose of poetic justice. The end.